All right, bet. So, first of all, Erica, welcome back, fam of the show. If you all weren't listeners in the very, very beginning, Erica been down since remotely Renee days. She's the founder of Black Rosie Media, been a journalist on multi-sports. You see it right there. So, Erica, welcome back. As you know, the fam, Serena, Nicole, Snooka, Booker, all here, gangs all here. Welcome back to Montgomery and Company.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's lovely to see y'all.
Yes, it's lovely to have you back. And now I kind of already like spilled the beans. I was going to let you tell us what's changed since the last time you've been here, but please tell us, starting out with Black Rosie Media, baby, because we love to see it.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, so since last time we spoke, I went through what's called an accelerator program and I got some help to just get some of the ideas that I had out of my head and onto paper and into the world. And one of the problems we were asked to tackle a problem that we see in an industry. So I chose sports, and I think that we do see a problem when it comes to representation, particularly for those who identify as women, as Black women in sports media. And so I had an idea to create an outlet that would put Black women and other melanated creators first and foremost. So everything that you see edited, written, produced, etc., by Black women and melanated people and faces. And so that's where the idea of Black Rosie Media came from. We launched in May 3rd. And so in just a month and some days, we've already started to see some traction. So I'm really excited.
Let's go.
Yeah, the experiment is working. Creators of color are looking for support, and we're providing that at Black Rosie Media.
Love
Hallelujah,
it.
hallelujah. I just have to jump in right here and say this because Renee and I just had this conversation at least once a week, but we just had it a few days ago. And one of the things I'm talking about now is there's so much emphasis on gender equity, but I'm talking about the lack of diversity in gender equity. And that's what my montage is now, is that I'm talking about. Yeah, we want better gender equity and everything, and we see some companies trying to do that, but I just don't think it's a big enough push as far as adding some diversity to that.
So congratulations on starting your company.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
amazing.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And
You know,
changing
so
that narrative.
no, I know you're changing the narrative. And speaking of that, changing the narrative, hockey. Okay, so hockey is a sport that not a lot of people from the community watches hockey. Okay, and I even saw some of your tweets that was hilarious. She was like, "That's what happens when you give the mic to the HNIC." Now I thought that was hilarious because we get what you meant, girl. It was. Tell me about that moment. What happened there for the people like me that maybe weren't watching all the moments of hockey? Like, give us some context to what happened.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to do the explaining on the hockey side, not necessarily for the white gaze of it all, but okay. So in hockey, one of the first things that blew my mind is I kept seeing HNIC, HNIC, and so growing up, I could just hear. I heard like right. I was hearing the voices of the uncles from the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
What is? And then I realized that acronym in hockey stands for Hockey Night in Canada. I promise you, every time every time I hear HNIC in hockey, I think it's the funniest thing because, to your point, Renee, hockey's not known to be very diverse. Black people have revolutionized hockey since before the turn of the last century, but it's one of those like hidden figure type things that.
Well, tell me about it. Wait a minute. What do you mean by that? I have no idea how hockey has revolutionized. No, Black people have revolutionized hockey. Tell me more.
Okay, so you need to know about the Colored Hockey League in Nova Scotia, Canada. And so Black athletes, very similar to what we know as the Negro Leagues throughout North America, so that would include Canada, but they would play baseball in the summer, spring months into the fall. But once it got too cold, those same athletes would transition over to ice hockey, particularly in Nova Scotia. And so things like the slap shot, a lot of people say that comes from a batting motion. or going down on the ice
Oh.
as a goaltender. If you look at some of the NHL games early on, you see that the goaltenders, even like the Miracle on Ice 1980s, the style was for the goalie to stand upright. Now you see the goalies doing full splits. That came from in the early 1900s. Black hockey players, goalies would go down on the ice and make stops and saves on the ice. So those are ways that, again, Black
Wow.
people have always been involved in hockey. But flash forward to, you don't see a lot of Black faces on the ice, in the C-suite, or even on the broadcast. But there is a Black man, David Amber, and he is the host of HNIC. And he also
I know you lying, Erica. I know you lying.
I swear I'm not. So I'm like, come on, like for the folks, like I just think that is the funniest
That
thing.
is very, very funny.
That is hilarious.
I'm done. So hold on a second. Black Rosie Media. This is what you get. Black Rosie Media. I had to just drop you a line because look, I really didn't know that. I knew all about the Black Negro Leagues. Look, I know about the ATA when it comes to tennis, the tennis matches in Harlem. I hear about all of that. I did not hear about how Black people have revolutionized hockey. So the more you know, and that brings me to the Stanley Cup Finals, which is going on. Well, actually just finished. We've crowned our champion. But what I also like to hear, first of all, tell me about the winners, because I hear that there was like different things going on. You got to explain it for people that may not watch every game, Erica.
Okay. So you had the Tampa Bay Lightning, were from the Eastern Conference, and they've won the last 2 Stanley Cups. We haven't seen a team in the National Hockey League do a three-peat since, might have been, I believe it was probably the Edmonton Oilers. And you know what? Their goalie was Black. Graham Fuhrer, look it up. The first Black man in the Hockey Hall of Fame. But anyway, so they were a heavy favorite coming in. And then you have a Colorado Avalanche team. A lot of people, all right, I'm going to put it like this. You know how people say, like, the Golden State Warriors, oh, they play boring basketball, baka, baka, ba. Boring or not, they got the Stanley Cup. Boring or not, they the NBA champs. And a lot of people say that about Colorado. Strong defensive team. Their defenders are some of the best offensive players in the regular season. And then that also translated into the playoffs. And it was the Colorado's first Stanley Cup win in the last 21 years. So this is their 3rd overall, and just really 2 titans of NHL in the last handful of seasons, especially with Tampa looking to do that three-peat, but wasn't happening. Colorado got it done in Game 6.
That's so lit.
Nice.
And so thank you for that. Like, I understood everything,
Every
okay,
word,
without
every
knowing
word,
nothing.
yes.
So thank you very much for that breakdown. So that's who just won the Stanley Cup Finals. Tell a friend that you know what's going on in the NHL now. Thank you, Black Rosie Media. Snookabuka. Oh, I thought Snook had something to say, and she's like just looking and just, I thought she was smiling so hard that she had
She's
something
hanging
to
on
say,
every
but
word.
she's hanging on to every word. This also brings me to, you don't only just cover hockey. Like, I remember you from the WNBA, covering the WNBA. I know that you're covering a lot of different sports. So for me, I'm just curious, like, we've seen a lot of talk about Roe versus Wade. So I'm curious, from you being a media company that leans into representation, this all feels like a common problem of just rights being taken. And so I'm just curious your thoughts.
Wow, there's so much. And last time we were on here, we were talking, of course, about John Lewis and the legendary John Lewis. I'm going to get back to your question, but they still have not passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So those are just some of the things that are still on the table. But Roe v. Wade now also under attack the day after we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And you see that women's bodies are being legislated in a massive way. And you even have the Clarence Thomases of the world
Come on now.
coming for other legislation and making equality political, but in a dangerous way, making equality political in a way where we use the lazy excuses of religion and safety as a reason to legislate what women can and cannot do. And yes, this definitely impacts women's bodies and the autonomy of their bodies, but we also have to think about the families that they have currently and the partnerships that they're in and how this is affecting and impacting those partnerships as well.
Yeah.
So those are things that people might say stick to sports, but listen, when we're talking about sports and when we're talking about policies or thinking about places like the WNBA, thinking about even women's hockey, where women, I mean, we just we see that, you know, track stars had to fight also just for having maternity leave.
Yes.
These are things that impact athletes, and if athletes, as examples, are limited to how they can discern when and how they want to start their families because of something that the Supreme Court is doing, of course it's going to impact sports because it impacts all of us. So there's a lot that I could say about what's happening politically and how that impacts, including, you know, I heard Snook talking about Title IX. And here's the thing, going back to Title IX, if you look, there's been studies done in the last 20 years or so of Title IX in particular. We've seen an adverse effect for Black girls and women because as schools now have to be Title IX compliant, they really focus on what they consider growth sports. And those growth sports tend to be sports that are played by white girls and women and not girls and women of color.
Yep.
That's I have to do it again. I'm just letting you know. You better foghorn snooker booker. But I'm just trying to show the versatility here because Erica, I'm sure that at a certain point you've had a problem with access. So we've had you talk about now the National Hockey League, Roe versus Wade. We know you cover the WNBA. You've been an analyst for the NWHL. So I just want to talk about now access because it seems like you're very qualified at all of these. Why did you feel the need to have a media company?
Wow, that is a great question, and we could definitely do a whole series on that, but I'll keep it concise as possible. As I was very fortunate to have opportunities to write at places like Sports Illustrated or the New York Times, places like ESPN, I started noticing that the same old me, you know, like same old E. Anyway, okay, but I used to love that song. Okay, anyway, I used to notice that I would show up to games, and when I was working at independent outlets, my seat would change as my outlet changed. And I started noticing that, again, I had these opportunities and I'm very grateful for those opportunities, but there were people that were there before me. There were people that continued on certain beats even after I transitioned to other things, that their access never changed. The consistency of their work was not valued at the same level of mainstream media. And there's a numbers game for sure. That being said, I sometimes push back when people say more is more, because we know that more is not more for everyone. And more is almost never more for Black women unless we make it a point for more to be more for us. Yeah. And usually that means somebody else done messed up somewhere. And we're ready because we've always been there.
We've been ready.
And so Black Rosie Media wants to be a place where we're not reacting to someone saying something out of pocket, which they kind of sort of had already been, you know, low-key saying anyway. We don't want to react to that. We don't want to react to, oh, it's International Women's Day. Let's have Erica and Kelly Schultz call actually a Colorado Avalanche game at New Jersey Devils. You know, that was an amazing opportunity. Thank you. An amazing opportunity to call an NHL game on the radio. And I want to make sure that other people have, other women, other Black women and women of color have those opportunities more regularly. We are often asked to, when we do get those opportunities, again, coming under less than ideal circumstances, and often we have to prepare with a lot less time than people who get their first break, as an example, in the NHL might get if they were kind of prepared and exactly.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because
I never actually.
You're right. It is a good point, because as you were saying it, I was like, because even though we get our chance when someone else messes up, we're not getting the proper amount of time to prepare, to be great. So we can't do what everybody else does. We have to be on point 24/7, which is really, yeah, it's a very unfair advantage, because you could probably do so much more if we had so much more time. And you're right.
Exactly.
That's
No
exactly what's going
time.
on.
No time.
Yeah.
So there's so many elements. Black Rosie Media is and will continue to grow to be as holistic and wraparound as possible, because there are a lot of different needs. There's certain Black people and melanated creators that are already working with. I spoke to someone today already shooting as a photographer for Major League Baseball, the NFL, and then went to another pro league and was kind of given the runaround. You know, it's not enough to work with
Yeah.
these leagues as you then look to transition. You have other people who, are looking for their first opportunity. And then you have other people who've already had their first opportunity, but they're realizing even at the entry level that their pay scale is extremely different than people with similar or sometimes less experience than they have. And Black Rosie Media wants to, and I do as a founder and an owner, do things differently. And part of what I do is I don't set a rates. The reason I don't do that is twofold. One is that I need to work as an owner on knowing how to negotiate, and I know that other people need to know that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation. Let's see what the value added is. Let's see what the event calls for, and then we will move accordingly. And so I do really want to empower creators when they have a conversation with Black Rosie Media to feel comfortable and confident asking for their value. And sometimes it won't work out. If it ain't in the budget, it ain't in the budget. But that's
Right.
right.
No, that's true.
These are conversations that we can have. And these are conversations that happen in business. Unfortunately, a lot of people that look like a lot of us on this screen are iced out of being able to have those at a professional level.
And you know, that actually
That's
brings me
absolutely right.
to something when you talk about diversity, because you're a Black Latina. So people think that diversity looks one way, but diversity is Latino, diversity is Black, diversity is a bunch of different things. So I love that because I feel like the more that we become inclusive, we also become exclusive, in a sense of we want to define what diversity looks like. Well, no, diversity, there is a lot of different diversity, but there's certain groups that don't receive as much assistance. And those two groups are the exact ones that you are, a Black Latina. So the Black women, Latino women, if you look at the pay scale, if you look at entertainment on TV, the representation, the amount of hosts, the amount of analysts, the amount of people that are sitting that are Black women or Latino women, you will see a very large disparity from other. And I think that's what Snook has been hitting on a part of. It's not just gender equality. There's diversity. There's that diversity piece that's also very important, because if you don't ask for it, it ain't going to happen. Like people just think that things are just going to automatically evolve over time. But I think the point of people making things like Black women photography, who we use for the excuse me, for the Atlanta Dream, that we're very proud to have them as our official photographers. Like, it's not like, oh, these are our side chick photographers. You know what I mean? Like, these is our officially official photographers.
Yes.
And there's a reason for that, because we understand that access does matter.
Access and education too.
Whoops.
I'm sorry?
Well, I was just going to add just real quick that, everybody's wowing about, the accomplishments that women are making at this point in history or whatever. But when you really look at it and you look at what's going on, you have to look at that, we can't, a lot of our young people won't be able to do things, because if you can see it, you can be it. And so even with the gender and it's a female, whatever, but if you're not seeing it in your particular culture, then it's still just as far away as it was before.
Facts. Serena, what were you going to say?
Oh, I thought Erica was gonna say something. I didn't want to cut you off, Erica. So sorry.
No, please go ahead.
You said Renee said access is very important. I mean, just to add to that, education is also very important. What you're doing, educating the people that you're working with. That's something that you don't see from really. I can't really think of any company that does that. That empowers the client, as and not just the company. You're like, no, tell me your number. Let's negotiate this. A lot of times as a business because you see that the company is only in it for their numbers and their business, so kudos to what you're doing. And like you talk about Black and Latina, Renee talked about, and Snook talked about diversity and the lack of diversity in both cultures. You have a startup, Renee. She's very into the VC world. We see the numbers: less than 2% go to women, period. Even less go to Black women. Even less goes to Latina women. So
Facts.
what you're doing and what your startup is just amazing on all fronts. So congrats again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I appreciate you elevating the education piece, because I think we talked about this last time I was on the show, but I come from a background of nonprofit and specifically policy work. And the work that I did was to be a youth leadership development expert. And so I'm bringing all of that back now with my own business and having autonomy. I can bring that back. And it's a very full circle moment for me. But there is this spectrum of change. And sometimes you are like Mother Teresa style, you see a problem, and so you feed the poor. And then there's people in the middle in the policy space where they are educating people and they're advocating, especially with what we see what's happening with the Supreme Court. You're giving people what's happening and also educating them on how it impacts them and what the future could look like if we just change it and pivot and tilt the frame. And then you have, your Bree Newsome, I'm gonna climb up a flagpole and rip down the Confederate flag type change, which is the radical change where you're not accepting the status quo. You're not accepting what exists as it is, and you are actively changing what you want to see operate differently. And so Black Rosie Media, if we directly aren't operating in those different silos, and it comes from the Midwest Academy, it's their spectrum of change. If we're not directly operating in those 5 or so buckets, we're then going to partner with people. I love that you brought up, Renee, Black women photography or photographers, because they already have a really great model for photographers. And so I don't need to replicate that model. I was lucky enough to talk with Polly, and I've been able to hire people that have been in that space. And so now it's like, what does replication in for Black women producers look like, for Black women writers look like, for Black women podcasters look like? And some of these mechanisms already exist. And now it's about coming closer to the middle and giving people options to be that Mother Teresa or to be that Bree Newsome, but all in the vein of changing the landscape of our profession.
I love that. The spectrum of change. Renee always talks about the different forms of advocacy, because like you said, being an advocate doesn't only look just one way. Ava DuVernay also talks about narrative change. We also just started our production company, Think Tank Productions, and it kind of has a similar mission as yours also, just to give a voice and create that narrative change to the people that come from the communities and the cultures, and to tell these stories, the cultures that we don't necessarily see a lot of storytellers come from. So that's amazing.
Hence the HNIC. You will understand why that's hilarious. But the ones that get it, if you know, Black Rosie Media is a community for Black women and melanated creators in sports media. And Erica, Ayala, we thank you for hopping on here again with us. Now called Montgomery & Co., but you've been down since remotely, Renee. Thank you for hopping on.
Thank y'all so much.
And please keep up the good work.
Yes. It's gonna be a long work, but good work. It's that good trouble. Keep getting in that good trouble.
There we go.
I like that.